Good evening. I'm Kimberly Jenkins Snodgrass, Chair of Interfaith Action for Human Rights. Welcome to the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition First Town Hall Series of 2021. On behalf of the coalition, I would like to thank you, our conscientious social media followers, for being both engaged and woke. Because of you, in less than 6 months, the COVID-19 Town Hall Series finished 2019 with over 18,000 views. I want to extend a special thank you to my IAHR colleague, David Smith. David is IAHR's Virginia Legislative Liaison and was instrumental in the booking of our tonight's special guest, Secretary Moran. Interfaith Action for Human Rights represents people of faith who educate and advocate in Maryland, DC, and Virginia for correction systems that avoid unnecessarily punitive practices such as solitary confinement that instead focus on rehabilitation and successful reentry. I want to take a moment to uplift our loved ones within the walls living nanoseconds to minutes, minutes to hours, hours to days in fear of this dreadful pandemic that has handcuffed the world. That's right, I said our. You see, my son, Kevin Snodgrass Jr., is wrongfully incarcerated and is housed in Virginia State Prison. We're in this together. And that means together we will crack the ceiling of Virginia's broken criminal justice system and continue to make good trouble in 2021. We have a packed program tonight, so let's get started. The Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition is excited this evening to have on our distinguished panel Commonwealth's Attorney for Loudoun County, Bhuta Bibarai. Attorney Bibarai is excited to bring a different lens on the criminal justice system, knowing that justice is truth and action. Admitted to practice law in the states of Virginia, New York, Maryland, and the United States Supreme Court for over 27 years. She has successfully, aggressively, and proficiently represented clients in over 3,500 cases. Prior to becoming a Commonwealth attorney, she served as General District and Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court Substitute Judge for the 20th Judicial Circuit from 2006 to 2017. Um, at this time, I believe she still has not arrived in the room, but we will continue anyway. Also here tonight, and he has just been called to testify, is candidate for Norfolk Commonwealth Attorney Ramin Fatahai. Candidate Fatahai is a Hampton Roads native, has served as Virginia Supreme Court law clerk and a public defender. Since 2006, he has served as state and federal prosecutor, with the last 8 years serving in the Norfolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Excuse me. Ramin is a champion for criminal justice reform. He has led the charge in Norfolk to decriminalize and legalize marijuana possession, abolish cash bail, abolish the jury trial penalty, and to make the justice system honor the principles that Black Lives Matter stand for. He is currently running to become Norfolk's next Commonwealth attorney. We are also happy to have my COVID-19 Justice Coalition colleague and Justice for Virginia Policy Director, Brian Kennedy. Justice for Virginia is a nonpartisan organization that advocates for criminals' legal system reform in Virginia. In that capacity, Brian works with legislators and other advocacy organizations to draft legislation and advocate to improve Virginia's troubled criminal system. For his day job, Brian is a senior assistant public defender with the Office of Public Defender in Fairfax, Virginia. Brian is also a frequent lecturer on criminal law issues at continuing legal education conferences. He's a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center. Welcome, gentlemen. Joining us at the bottom of the hour will be our special guest, Virginia Secretary, Public Safety and Homeland Security, Brian Moran. Throughout the program, I ask that our viewers submit questions for our guests via Facebook, and coalition members can submit questions via chat. And you will be asked to turn on your cameras later in the program. Come on, y'all. Let's light up the faces on the camera, and do not put just your name up as if you don't have a face. Before we get started, many of you ask, who is the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition? The coalition consists of over 50 organizations across Virginia who have come together to represent COVID-19 as it relates to Virginia's detention system. The coalition goals and demands are as follows. Release any person in custody who does not pose a demonstrated imminent threat of bodily harm to someone else, meaning release all parole eligible people, such as discretionary, pre 1995, geriatric parole, and anyone in parole reentry programs who does not pose an imminent threat. Issue immediate conditional pardons for people who are less than 1 year from release, and for those who have gone through the investigation process. Release anyone held in pretrial detention who does not pose an imminent threat of bodily harm to someone else. No new jail time for anyone who does not pose an imminent threat of bodily harm to someone else. Release persons who have already completed their prison sentence, being held in DBHDS custody and being held in DOC custody pretrial, who do not pose an imminent threat of bodily harm to someone else. We are asking the governor to release our loved ones. At this time, I'm gonna come back on screen to see who do I have here? Okay, Attorney Kennedy is me and you. Brian is again my colleague here within the coalition, and it seems that Attorney Federhigh had to go testify, and we're still waiting on Attorney Buddha. So in that case, Brian, let's talk about a bill that the coalition tried to put forth before the legislation this session, but we was unable to. But let's share about the bill and what we're trying to do.
Sure, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So for those of you who've joined us before over the past few months, you've heard a couple times about a bill the coalition was trying to do both in the special session in August as well as in the regular session now that's going on right now. And the intent of that bill was to basically codify and improve the release mechanism that the General Assembly created last year in their budget amendment, to basically give the Department of Corrections power to release people who are towards the end of their sentences. And the idea being the more people we could release, the fewer people would be in DOC custody and the safer everyone would be. There's been some difficulties with that process from our perspective. So the bill would have basically made it a little bit clearer what everyone was supposed to do and encourage the department to release more people and actually require them to. We had discussions with several legislators about that, and unfortunately, no legislator was willing to pick that up. I think there was some confusion about, isn't this what we already did? Because I think there's a lot of misinformation or not enough information about how few people we've released compared to other states, or how few people we've released under the program that the General Assembly created last year. So we were disappointed that no one picked it up. That doesn't mean that's the end of our work. COVID certainly is not going away anytime soon. It is certainly not going to be going away for people who are going to end up in DOC custody. Even once we vaccinate people, people are going to be going in and out of DOC custody for a long time who don't have vaccinations. They're going to be at a real risk for contracting COVID, a real risk for dying when they were not sentenced to die. So the work will continue, both our advocacy work with the state to improve conditions within DOC and to try to improve for the future. I think we can also probably all agree, hopefully this is the last pandemic of our lifetime, the last public health emergency, but I somehow doubt it will be. And obviously our friends, family members, and loved ones who are incarcerated are always at a higher risk when they're incarcerated for public health issues. So it's not going to be the end of time that we're going to need that bill.
So Brian, without the bill, and we probably won't be able to bring the bill forward until the next session, what can be done to protect the health of our prisoners?
So a lot of what we can do for people who are incarcerated, both in local and regional jails, as well as in DOC, so in state prisons, of which they are a lot and varied. We obviously, us regular people, even lawyers, even, people who represent people in jail have very little option. There can be lawsuits if the conditions are not constitutional, but that's a high bar to meet. Although there are groups, ACLU of Virginia and others, who do lawsuits about that. There's also advocacy with the politicians who run them, like the director of the Department of Corrections or the governor. There's also advocacy, so release mechanisms. So people can be granted, as Kimberly, you were talking about in our demands, people can be granted clemency or pardons. The governor can release anyone who wants in all of DOC if he wanted to right now, today. There's a lot of controversy around pardons and clemency right now from the federal level, but we have to remember that they're actually really good and really helpful because of how punitive and racist our criminal legal system has been, and people are stuck there because of that. So there's that type of advocacy as well. The last thing I'll say is there's several bills, even though this one didn't make it in the General Assembly session, there's several bills this session that could potentially be helpful. Right now, for example, there's no oversight by anyone outside of DOC, the Department of Corrections, over what happens in DOC. So Delegate Patrick Hope, for example, has a bill that would create an office of an ombudsman that basically is someone employed by the state, but outside of DOC, whose whole job it is to investigate complaints or to look into issues that are going on in DOC. So for example, wardens have their own jobs. The director of DOC has his own job. They have a lot going on. Part of their jobs are figuring out what's wrong with their facilities. This person and their small staff, their whole job would be figuring out what's going on, responding to complaints from people who are residents of those facilities, for better word, people are incarcerated in those facilities, and their family members who hear about those things. So there's lots of things we can do. That's not going to be a cure-all for anyone. Obviously, we know that. Creating a committee or creating a position, one person or a small group of people isn't going to solve something for a department that's almost 30,000 people incarcerated in our DOC, but it might be something that can help. It'll at least give people an outlet, and it'll give those of us who are concerned about people who are incarcerated things to do. For local and regional jails, I'll just note sheriffs or local elected officials in every county and city in the Commonwealth. So there's advocacy work to be done there. There's a lot of people doing that work in the coalition as well as outside the coalition. If you're interested in helping to protect people who are located in any facility, we have in the coalition a facilities working group who brainstorms ways to help our loved ones who are in facilities, whether they're state, local, or regional facilities. And you can please reach out to the coalition if you're engaged in that work or want to be engaged in that work, and find out how you can join us or how we can help you in that work.
Fantastic. I believe Attorney Fetterhigh is back with us, Ramin. If you'll turn on your camera, we can bring you in. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right. So while you was gone, I already gave your introduction. So welcome back to the panel. So you was testifying on the bill. Quickly tell us, what bill was you testifying on?
I was, and I apologize very much. It was sort of a very short notice call from a legislator. The bill on which I was testifying in, and which now is under discussion in the House Courts Criminal Law Subcommittee, has to do with reclassifying the possession of controlled substances. We're one of the states where possessing $10 of somebody else's Adderall is a felony that permanently civilly disables you, causes you to lose your voting rights, creates all sorts of other barriers to being a full member of society. So I was lobbying on behalf of a number of Commonwealth's attorneys from across the state, elected Commonwealths, who are in favor of this change. So I'm interested to see how it'll turn out, because I think it's a major human rights issue. So and it's something near and dear to me from my public defender days, where I saw a lot of people pulled into the criminal justice system for substance use disorders. And the data now shows that it doesn't lead to people kicking their habits any faster. All it leads to is separation from society, immiseration, and greater trouble. So keep your fingers crossed. We'll find out if it makes it out of committee in the next few minutes.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you and welcome back. And I really appreciate you being with us. And then Brian, you mentioned that Delegate Hope had a bill, an oversight bill. Do you happen to have that bill number? Anybody have the bill number on that? If not, we can get it and drop it in the box for our viewers. Okay. All right. All right. So okay, Jen Carter, HB 2325. So if you would, it's the oversight bill patroned by Delegate Patrick Hope. And to our listeners, as we work in this program tonight, we go down this program tonight, what we're going to do, we're going to advocate for bills that may be of interest to you. It's not necessarily that the entire coalition support these bills, but we want to put it out there. Session is in. We want to support all the bills that we can. So you will hear me tonight sometime call out some conditional pardons that I wish would happen. So that's the kind of night it's going to be. It's a people's night. This is your event tonight. This is your town hall. So one of the things I want to discuss is regional jails and how COVID-19 is being dealt with in the regional jail. I know that you guys do work in the community, and regional jails is in your process before these individuals go to state. So let's talk about the regional jails. The COVID pandemic, is it that offenders or prisoners, inmates are being released more today than previously? Has there been any progress, or what are you seeing from your legal perspective? It's a conversation. Just jump in here.
So I'll jump in because I actually have a question for you, Ramin, about this too. We were on a panel. I moderated a panel with you and a few of your colleagues months ago. It could have been 3 months ago or 20 months ago. I have no idea at this point how long ago it was. But we all agreed at that point that you all and a lot of your colleagues around the state actually were doing a lot to help release people who were incarcerated in local jails, especially pretrial, and some people at the end of their sentences. And obviously a lot of my day job colleagues, defense attorneys, were doing the same thing. But I've found recently, especially November, December, January, for a lot of, lack of a better word, there's been a lot of COVID fatigue. So even though our numbers are worse than they were in March or April, it seems like we're not doing, and this is, I think, both sides, and judges and sheriffs and everybody. A lot of people around the state aren't doing it as much as they were, or we're not doing it with the same gusto as we used to be. Have you found that down where you are?
And yeah, Brian, it's great to see you again. Are you talking specifically about taking safety measures and interacting with each other and with clients and witnesses, or are you talking about the court system as a whole?
I think it's more about at the beginning of the pandemic, we were like going through lists of people in the local and regional jails and saying, who can we release right now? And I think judges were, in a lot of the state, taking into account COVID as a factor of whether they should be holding someone or not, pretrial or sentencing somebody. And I definitely still have judges who are doing that, absolutely, and some prosecutors who are doing that. But I think like everyone else, when we've gotten this fatigue of the pandemic, we've been talking about it less. I don't know if you all are talking about it the same amount, more or less, where you are.
So I can speak to the team that I run. I run the half a dozen prosecutors who handle our drug cases, our auto fatalities, and a couple of other sort of drug-related offenses. I can say that in my interactions with our judges are still mindful of the fact that the virus numbers are up. I think that we were being more careful when the positivity rates were in the single digits in the spring than we are now when Norfolk's positivity rate is approaching 20%. But we haven't forgotten altogether what's going on. In fact, I got a call from a senior member of the sheriff's office within the last week looking to do what we had been doing, which is prosecutors in Virginia aren't funded to prosecute misdemeanors. We have to do it. We either need grants or we essentially have to steal time from felonies. So we don't prosecute a lot of misdemeanors here, but we have reached down and bonded a lot of people who needed to be bonded. And we did the same thing. just recently. The calls haven't come as much, but they're coming. And I can tell you that on my team, the point that I've tried to make, and I think that the judges are also doing it on their own, is they're recognizing that cases where a short stint in jail would have been appropriate in the past. And I mean, the data backs up that there are times when immediacy of sentences, even if they're relatively short sentences, do have some long-term penological benefit. But we're recognizing that a short sentence, especially just for the principle of the thing, is really more of a public health risk than it is worth, because it creates a potential disease vector into the jail and a potential disease vector out of it. So I've encouraged, my subordinates have carried out, and some of the judges, and this is anecdotal, obviously, but the judges, I think, are also recognizing. I've heard judges say, you really ought to go to jail, but it's COVID. I'm not sending you to jail this time, but watch out when COVID's gone. But objectively speaking, I mean, the people are going down all over the place right now with COVID. The very fact that the court system is operating at close to full capacity indicates that the response right now is not, it's different than the response was in the spring.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll add to that is, at least where we are, and I assume it's the same across the state in prisons as well as jails, there used to be programming for people, classes or things they could do. And now there's none of that, because you can't get people together. You can't take people from different pods and move them. So even people who believe there's some type of benefit to incarceration, which I'm not particularly one of those people, but some judges are, some prosecutors are. So there's some people who are. That benefit has greatly reduced when we can't give any type of rehabilitative programming right now in most of our facilities because of COVID.
Okay. So one of the viewers online has sent me a note, and here's some information for you that I'm going to share. The Federal Bureau of Prisons has released 20,800 people home from confinement. They have a death toll of approximately 183 people. We, meaning Virginia, have a death toll of 53 people and 3 staff deaths, with about 944 people released from DOC. No one that has a release date within a year should be incarcerated. The General Assembly authorized the DOC to release people who have less than a year. This comment was sent in from Karen Morrison. So what you guys think about that? Those numbers. Should we be able to do better? Should Virginia be able to do better?
I mean, I think a lot of states have done better than we have in terms of releasing people. These are obviously numbers of the Federal Bureau of Prisons is obviously the prison level. So in fairness to the Commonwealth as a whole, there are people at local and regional jails who are released. That does increase this number. But comparing apples to apples in terms of prison numbers, the Federal Bureau of Prisons has released 20,000, which is almost as many people as we have in our whole DOC. Obviously, we're only a state,
right?
But too many people have died in our prisons, and certainly those proportional numbers are really concerning. And presumably, they would have been able to be lower had we released more people sooner, because of what we know about how the disease spreads. So, given that we're starting to vaccinate people in DOC, which is fantastic, but because of shortages from the federal government, because of the same shortages we all have, that's never going to go fast enough, even if we prioritize people in DOC. So we're going to need to take other steps to do things, and we should follow what the federal government did and what a lot of other states have done, because also what we know is a lot of people got released who wouldn't have been released, and there's been no public safety issue from releasing those. So we should do more, because it's the easiest way to do that.
Fantastic. Okay, well, our special guest has signed on, and we honored to have Secretary Moran here. Good evening, Secretary Moran.
Good evening. Kimberly, how are you tonight?
I'm great. I want to say, before I introduce you formally, I want to say thank you thank you for, without hesitation, agreeing to join our Hall series. And this reminds me that I need to send a shout out to my colleague, David Smith, who was instrumental in making all this happen. So thank you for being here tonight.
Well, in addition to David Smith, I look at the names and I recognize many of them. I have been honored to serve in this position. Brian, I was a defense attorney up in Fairfax for a long time, worked the courts up in that district. And before that, I was a prosecutor in Arlington. So I come with a great deal of court experience and from both sides. And so I look forward to hearing from you all. And, I see Karen Morrison's name and Harvey Yoder's. And so it's Mr. Walker. So it'll be, look forward to it. So I do look forward to listening, and I'd be happy to just kind of give some statistics or information to start with, Kimberly, and then I'm all ears. Is that the way we want to proceed?
Yes, but let me introduce you to the public, because your bio was sent over to me, and I went out to Wikipedia and I found a fun fact about you that even I didn't know.
There's a
So,
terrible picture of me on Wikipedia, but that's okay. My kids make fun of me all the time about that.
okay, for the viewers, Secretary Moran was appointed by Governor McCullum in January 2014 and reappointed by Governor Northam in January 2018 as Virginia's first Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. The Office of Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security comprises of 10 state agencies and includes the Homeland Security Division. Secretary Moran serves as the governor's Homeland Security Advisor and the governor's Criminal Justice Advisor. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you the fun fact that I found. When I looked you up, it said American politician, and I have only known you as the Public Safety Secretary. So I was like, American politician. And then I looked further, and I've been in Virginia over 30 years. And I learned that you served in the House of Delegates from 1996 to 2008. So that's how you beat us on those bills. We're in your backyard. Okay, but I thought that was a fun fact. I was surprised. And
well, I did serve from the Alexandria, west end of Alexandria, a little bit of Fairfax County, and I served on the Courts of Justice Committee and the Crime Commission during those years. And so that was a tremendous experience. And in fact, I just joined, I was watching the Senate Judiciary Committee debate the sexually violent predator bill and a number of other pieces of legislation. I truly still love watching them work. I love the legislating, and particularly with us lawyers, we know words matter.
right.
And how they legislate is extremely important to the outcomes. And there's been so much legislation over the last 6 months, whether through special session, but even beginning last session with the Democratic control of the General Assembly. We thought raising the larceny threshold and eliminating driving on suspended fines is something that has been around for a long time. We tried to address, and we ultimately addressed it, that people shouldn't lose their license for non-payment of traffic fines or non-violent or non-driving offenses like marijuana possession. And to go from that was like a year to 2 years ago, and now to where we are today, and now debating additional reforms in the criminal justice system, really has been a whirlwind of activity. And so anyway, we can talk about that, but that's not exactly what we're here to talk about.
Right. We're here to talk about COVID-19, but
Yeah.
You know what? This is the People's Town Hall, but also our guests, we could talk about as much as time allows, so we can share.
Well, let me start out. Today, the governor did, it was interesting to listen to the tail end of that conversation with respect to, once COVID began and the actions that were taken. And, the fast forward to today, we are very pleased that vaccinations are occurring in our prisons and jails. A lot of controversy swirling around that, but it's something I feel I feel really good about that. We are aggressively pursuing vaccinating our staff as well as our inmates. And so the numbers I have to share with you as of just this evening, we've received 15,400 doses. We've administered 5,821, and that would be 3,159 inmates, 2,662 staff, and that's the Moderna vaccine. And so that just began about a week and a half ago. So we still have some to do, and we're doing them as we, every day, and we hope to get another shipment next Monday and continue. DOC's ramped up. We have the staff, and we are vaccinating individuals. So we're pleased about that. Now, I'll say now, in terms of the COVID cases themselves, it would appear as though 564 offenders have active COVID-19. I just looked at their website. I have 583, but somewhere between that. That changes obviously based on the tests that we conduct. 576 of those offenders are at their facilities and 7 in hospitals. 7,578 inmates have recovered. So obviously back since March, inmates who had contracted the disease, 7,578 have recovered. Total 53 COVID positive offenders have passed away. A total of 82,430 offender tests have been administered. Now that's why that is important, of course, is, as this disease developed, we learned that asymptomatic individuals could pass on the disease. And so we were very aggressive in working with VDH partners to get testing, and our National Guard, to get testing at our facilities. And so 82,000 have been tested, over 82,000. Obviously, we don't have 82,000 inmates. Many have been tested several times. We've been to Buckingham, Fluvanna, Greensville, numerous times to test. And so that is a significant testing number. And then lastly, the inmate early release program. At the beginning of this, we did talk. I recall being at the podium talking about jails and courts and what defense attorneys, what judges, what prosecutors could do in terms of reducing the number of individuals entering the jails, and I think they did a terrific job. So I thank them and appreciate their work on that, trying to use alternatives to incarceration. So we, as a state agency in our prisons, we obviously have parole, and
Yes.
parole. If you recall, our parole board at that time, the chair was Adrian Bennett. They did. They reviewed in the month of March. They reviewed about 4 times as many as they typically review, and they released a number of individuals, many of which drew a lot of attention. But we withstood that. Parole board makes their decisions, regardless of how controversial. They were able to defend those decisions, and we stand by those decisions. And then there was a lot of discussion around the pardon process. That again is very time intensive, has to be investigated, and so what we thought up right here in our office was, well, how about giving DOC the opportunity to expeditiously review individuals, and that would be the better approach to start to relieve the population in our correctional facilities. And so we came up with something called the Inmate Early Release Program, giving DOC the ability to review individuals with less than 1 year to serve on their sentence, and then some other conditions with respect to types of crimes. And so we submitted that to the legislature via a budget amendment, because the session at that time was already over, but they were returning for the veto session, the reconvened session in April. We submitted it as a budget amendment, and they passed it. And so sometime in late April, once the governor signed the budget, that program took effect. And as of today, a total of 1,876 have been approved, 1,444 individuals have been released, 944 from facilities, 2 from hospitals, 502 from jails. And so that is proceeding along. Home health plans required and all, I should mention all that information is on the DOC website. So, and I do have another statistic here. It looks like they reviewed over 2,600 individuals and make for eligibility. So those are the 3 buckets I wanted to provide to you in terms of data. The vaccines that I'm very encouraged about, the COVID cases, which continue to be a challenge in any congregate housing setting. That continues to be a challenge, but we're aggressively testing so that we can impose appropriate quarantine and isolation methods pursuant to CDC guidelines. And then the inmate early release program, which continues to this day. So with that, Kimberly, I'm all ears. I'm going to listen in and look forward to the conversation.
Okay, fantastic. I see some follow-up questions, but before we go to the follow-up, I would like to welcome our guest, Commonwealth Attorney, Loudoun County, Bhuta Bibarai. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And Kimberly, I appreciate you hosting this event, and I appreciate the invitation. As you indicated, I'm Bhuta Bibarai, and I am Loudoun County's Commonwealth Attorney as of January 1st of 2020. So I'm fairly new to this, but this is an exciting conversation for me. So again, thank you for having me.
Well, we have been talking about COVID-19 as it affects regional jails, and Secretary Moran has just given us a wealth of statistics. But one of the things I saw on your Twitter that moved me about this gathering, because I think we are making history here tonight, is that the community and legislators and the governor's office appointees can come together to have a conversation. Tonight is a conversation, not a protest. And I saw your tweet, and it really moved me in that way. So if there's anything you would like to add before we go to a video, we have a video, Secretary Moran, that we would like for you to, it's for the whole panel and our viewers to see. But Attorney Bhuta, if you have anything.
I do it, and I thank you for really highlighting that part that you just said, is that the days of prosecutors being anti-releasing anybody or anti-defaulting to jail or prison, those days are not the current climate. Our nation is speaking to us. It's saying that we need to change how we are doing things, and we need to follow the law, which is basically you incarcerate somebody if they are an unreasonable risk toward the safety of our community. We don't just use jail as a default just because we can. And I think that just requires us to work much more collaboratively together, so that we are working with our General Assembly. We're working with our law enforcement partners, public defenders, our judges, and our state legislatures, including the governor's office. So I'm very excited about where we have come. It saddens me as to how we got here, but I'm excited about where we are right now and what good we can do this point forward. So thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Fantastic. So at this time, we're going to take a look at the video. Afong, if you would run the video, and this is your time to readjust, get some water and so forth.
The voices you hear are from members of the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition. The words you hear are from letters from people behind bars.
These are real, dark, uncertain, and frightening times to be incarcerated in Virginia.
The sound of a cough or sneeze has never been so tense and provoking.
Now I awake with thoughts of an attacker hurting me, killing me, only I can't save myself, and those paid to protect me are possibly the vessels of my attacker.
They say stay 6 feet apart from everyone, but we are stuck in the pod all day. That's not 6 feet from anyone. I just want to feel safe.
They issue soap, yet it never lasts. The 2 bars of soap being passed out once a week are smaller than hotel soap.
I'm being told that I can't go to work till the stay-at-home order is lifted for my safety. But they have us housed around guys that work in the kitchen, medical, and administration who have direct contact with people from the outside.
Here I am in the middle of a pandemic with the governor declaring a state of emergency. All I'm given to deal with this is a mask, instructions to wash my hands, and to let them know if I feel sick. Then I'm put back into this congested environment with approximately 80 other people and just told to survive the best we can.
There's not even a place in this prison for people with pre-existing health issues to go if the virus hits this place.
It seems if you committed a violent crime, have pre-existing health issues, and COVID-19 hits, you could be looking at a death sentence.
I have asthma, so contracting COVID-19 would be more serious than most. I feel like a sitting duck just waiting to get shot.
Even though I committed a crime 20 years ago, I am still a human being. And this exclusion makes me feel like I'm being told that my medical issues don't matter, that my life doesn't matter.
COVID-19 reinforces the feeling that my life is expendable, a feeling that prison already tries to create within us.
Of course, I wasn't sentenced to death. However, sometimes I wonder if that's not what the system is hoping for instead of releasing me.
What happens in our prisons affects the safety of us all. Governor Northam must do more to ensure that no harm comes to our citizens behind bars. More screening, more testing, more safety, more oversight. Let more people go.
All righty. So what's going on now is we are blowing up social media. The questions are coming in, so we're gonna turn it over to the community and stick to our word that this is their town hall. My colleague Joanna Guzman is going to come on, and we're going to pull some questions for you, Secretary Moran, and panel members. Feel free to participate also.
Can we read the letters that were submitted for tonight before the questions?
Based on the message I just got, we're going to do the Facebook, Jen.
Okay. I would love for Secretary Moran to get to hear the letters if that's possible, but
he will hear the letters, but we're going to pull some of these Facebook questions. These people are on live and have some questions. Joanna?
So Johanna is not on the Zoom. She's putting the questions into our Google Doc. So let's take a look.
Okay.
She sent me one question previously. So for Secretary Moran, this is a long question, and so I'm going to ask first, are you aware of the conditions at Sussex 2? And I have some details here about what's going on if you would like to hear them. It's a fairly long question, but just trying to see if you're aware of what's going on there and if you would like to hear the details of some of the things that people have been reporting there. Okay, so from Jenna White, who is who runs Virginia Coalition for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. She says, is VDOC aware of the current inhumane conditions at Sussex 2 State Prison? Those guys have been on a 24-hour lockdown for months, with only allowing them 20 minutes every 3 days for shower, calls, and J-pay. The doors are padlocked with no floor officers to unlock the doors. This is inhumane and completely unnecessary. Let's not forget the 19 guys sleeping on the pod floor for the past several weeks. This is beyond ridiculous. Temps today in the cells were registering at 92 degrees. Yes, 92 degrees due to the heat being put on. If you don't care about our loved ones, then care enough about your staff. They are being overworked, daily understaffed, which is not safe. And it is not due to COVID. None of us want what happened at Sussex 1 last week, where your staff and a canine dog was stabbed. 30-some men were moved to Keene Mountain and Red Onion. Please step up and make strides to improve the conditions at Sussex 2 as well as other facilities. I realize it isn't a COVID release question, but these conditions are happening and being overlooked under COVID blanket, which waives the incarcerated members' rights. Please, these are our family and loved ones.
Secretary Moran?
I appreciate you sharing that with me. I will look into those allegations.
Right, so we have a few more questions. Someone asked, what powers does the governor hold in reforming the criminal justice system here in Virginia, and how can we ensure that this 2021 race focuses on these issues? I guess that's for the whole panel to answer.
Maybe, Secretary Moran, why don't you go ahead? I can back you up if you want.
There's been criminal justice reform and police reform were the subject of a special session that extended for over 2 months, and there were a number of bills that were passed, and one of which that I'm excited about is the sentencing bill that eliminates jury sentencing. As both the prosecutor and the defense attorney, that was something I thought was archaic to have the jury not only find guilt or innocence, but if guilt is determined, then they actually sentence the individual. They sentence the individual with very little knowledge about the person sitting before them in judgment. All they know really is what happened at trial. They know the nature of the offense, but in terms of mitigating factors, there's very little that is shared with the jury. And so that was Senator Joe Morrissey's legislation. It passed, the governor signed it. I think that was a significant reform of our criminal justice system. So as any number of reforms that have occurred, and both working with the legislature, and the governor has signed these bills, and we're promoting legislation as well. Just, decriminalization of marijuana last year. This year we are moving forward with legalization and expungement of any prior convictions and or arrests for marijuana or possession with intent to distribute marijuana. So that's a major reform as well. There's also activity around automatic restoration of voting rights. That's something both Governor McAuliffe and Governor Northam believe in strongly, and that has been, they've been doing it as their clemency power, but the legislature is moving forward with a constitutional amendment. So the governor themselves doesn't have to actually do that. But fortunately, in the last 2 administrations, we've had governors that very much believed in restoring individuals' rights. So that's just a flavor of some of the things that have been going on. This year, I have a particular one that I love is elimination of the habitual offender law. This was something back in 1999 as a legislator, I sponsored legislation to eliminate the habitual offender law. This was a case where you could pick up 2 to 3 driving on suspendeds and become a felon. Driving on suspended because you weren't able to pay your fines and costs did not make you a dangerous individual or dangerous driver. There was no reason to make those individuals felons for that type of behavior. Senator Bill Stanley, we eliminated it in 1999, so there were no further declarations of habitual offender, but we could not at that time go back and eliminate those who had already been declared an habitual offender. Senator Stanley has that piece of legislation this year. It's already passed the Senate, so really excited about that. And that's one I have some personal stake in. I really look forward to taking that next step. It's long overdue. So that's just a flavor, Jen, of some of the things that have been going on. They're really substantial changes in our criminal justice system, and look forward to, I'm sure I've given Brian and Ramin others other examples to mention if you'd like in Buddha. Yeah.
Secretary Moran, I have a question. When we talk about criminal justice reform, yes or no, can there be criminal justice reform without prison reform? You on mute. You on mute.
Well, we've performed a great number of pieces, in the criminal justice realm. So we have had a lot of success in changing our criminal justice system. So
Yes. The reason
I'd have to hear what you have in mind specifically.
The reason I say that is in most cases, just like when we had the special session, what happened to George Floyd was tragic. It hit the world. But the truth of the matter is, there's been a lot going on in Virginia before George Floyd, before Breonna Taylor. We have our stuff here in Virginia. So what I'm saying is, when it comes to criminal justice reform, we must also include prison reform. That's criminal justice reform, because we know that systemic racism exists in this area, and we have to have that conversation. Just yesterday, I believe it was, our new president has mandated no private prisons. But in Virginia, I think we threw the bill out. Those are the conversations we have to have and keep it real. Prison reform, when we talk about administrative segregation, solitary confinement, it was said, we have a bill, SB 1301, but it was said, we're going to put solitary confinement to the side for the next session. And that's not on you. That's on the legislators we're going to carry the bill. And I'm saying in Virginia, as we reform our system, the broken system, we must be able to chew gum, walk at the same time. We cannot say, okay, you sit in solitary confinement or administrative segregation while we work on the death penalty. Or, we have to learn how to multitask. And one of the things that I would like, and this is to the attorneys on the panel and the secretary, stop studying Black people. Every time, or people of color, you want to study. That's why, and I'll be like, okay, what they studying now? There's enough studies across the board that we don't need to keep studying people of color. And here's the skepticism about the vaccination. In all my life, and I will soon be 60 years old, I have never seen it publicized for Black folks and people of color to be first. So when you come to me with a vaccination and say, this is best for you because people of color are at risk, that's the skepticism because of the other tests that was done on us. So I get it. And then I saw this, and correct me, Secretary Moran, I really wanted to ask you this. I saw where there was incentives for offenders, prisoners, to take the vaccination. And so what's that all about? What's that all about?
I'm sorry, there's what?
I saw, I was reading something, and it was a center, and someone jump in if you know what I'm talking about. It's a center for
an incentive. We're incentivizing. We're trying to encourage individuals to take the vaccine. There's a lot of skepticism among some who and this frankly is not unique at all to our prison or the prison staff, but hospitals. Reading an article today about long-term care facilities, and the staff isn't accepting the vaccine. It's 95% effective. Dr. Fauci has verified and all the science says it is a very effective vaccine. And so we want to encourage people to take it. It's the only way we're going to turn the corner on this highly contagious. And now we understand there's a variant that makes it even more contagious. And so we have to turn the corner on this horrible pandemic, and taking the vaccine is the way to accomplish that. And so we are the DOC decided to incentivize with providing extra email, extra phone calls, which frankly, I think is a wonderful idea to give our inmates an opportunity to connect with their family even more. So what I don't understand what your objection is
I
too
have
often.
no
They're
objection.
not being cajoled. They're not being coerced.
No.
It's an incentive cajoling them to please take the vaccine. So you'd have to describe to me why is that objectionable? We'll review it again, but it seemed to me, DOC decided to do it. It seemed to me to be a pretty good decision.
Oh, no, sir.
So
I don't find an objection to it. I would just like to add, I'll make a suggestion. Time off. Time credit. You might get more participation. No, I don't object to it. I was just saying that it was occurring. And remember, I use this system. Everything that's going on with COVID-19, I'm a COVID-19 survivor, and my son is incarcerated within VDOC, and I use this system. So I don't object to it at all. So I want to be clear about that. I don't object to it. Commonwealth Attorney Buta?
So Kimberly, if I can respond to your questions, what you were just saying a little bit of a while ago there, as far as, stop doing tests or data just coming from the minority community, people of color. And you're exactly right. But the hard part is this, that the way we've worked the system for so long is that's who we have incarcerated. That's who we've used the system against. So that is our majority. So if we don't do the data on our people of color, then what ends up happening is, no offense, you don't have any daggone data to draw from, because that's such a small number that is outside of that. So what we have to try to do is to have that comparison so that we can literally look at the black and white comparison. 2020 was, on so many levels unfortunate, and I don't want to say this and be glib about it, but, but for COVID and but for George Floyd happening at the same time, we wouldn't have had this transformation, because we wouldn't have had people sitting at home watching TV as the incident is happening in real time, and they're thinking, what the hell just happened? And they had their little kid sitting beside them trying to ask a parent, did that man just kill that man? And now we have to be accountable to our kids. But for COVID, we all wouldn't have experienced it in real time. So unfortunately we did, but now we have to take the takeaway for this has got to be, now what do we do? Because we also used the experience of COVID to decrease the amount of individuals that we have in our local facilities, right? I know on the state level, they were trying to do that as well, but on our local facility, we traditionally in Loudoun County had about 400 to 425 people incarcerated at any period of time. We are down to 250. And guess what? Knock on wood, man, not jinx it. We're still safe. So that's teaching us a lesson to saying, maybe we need to stop using this damn default to jail, because what are we doing? Other than locking people up, taking them from their jobs, taking them away from their homes, taking them away from their families, what are we really doing? We're just keeping a whole group of people down. So now we have to be a little bit more creative, because I'm a taxpayer in my community. I don't want to bear, if I do it selfishly, I don't want to bear the burden of having to support the schools, the roads, our amenities all by myself. I want as many people to contribute to that. And how we do that is by making it a success-oriented system. I don't have problems consequencing people, but I can't be breaking people just for the sake of breaking them. So that's where the whole vision changes from the governor down to, your neighbor down the street. We just all have to get engaged and say, stop wasting resources. My money, my people, everything. And that's the collaboration part. So the governor can help a lot. Individual Commonwealth attorneys' offices can help a lot. Defense attorneys, do your damn job. Hold us accountable. Because if you keep, sitting on sidelines and playing that numbers game because you don't have the time, you know what? We all make mistakes. We don't want to make mistakes. At the end of the day, we want to make the right decision. Safety and justice. It's not a trade-off. Okay? It's a balance. It's not a trade-off. And we have to change that lens. Otherwise, we're not doing anything different. We have another, couple of days, a couple of weeks, everybody's talking about it, and then we'll all go back to our muscle memory norm after COVID. Well, we can't let this opportunity pass us by. We got to serve our community better.
And Kimberly, can I jump in on something to follow up on what you said about the trade-off between public safety and justice, really? So when the budget amendment that Secretary Moran was talking about took place last April, that was 9 months ago or so, right? And at the time, my recollection was that DOC estimated that applied to about 2,000 people, almost 3,000 people potentially that would have gotten out within that year. So that means that almost by next month, all of those people who were eligible in April for release are out now because they all were estimated to get out in the next year. But DOC only released 1,000 of those people. And obviously now almost probably 85% of those people are out, and we haven't had any public safety risk because those people were all at the end of their DOC sentences and were fine to be released in the community. So the processes put in place by DOC that slowed that number and reduced that number have proven to be probably unnecessary because those people didn't get any programming in the past year, right? They didn't have any real rehabilitative services since last year because of trying to keep people trying to keep people safe, doing what we're supposed to do, but they got no additional services and nothing bad has happened. So to me, I think that shows, in terms of what can the governor do with criminal justice reform, obviously the governor is weak in Virginia compared to, the president, for example. The legislature does a lot, but what the governor can absolutely do any minute is release people. DOC can do it under the budget amendment, and the governor can do it under his clemency powers. And especially people who only have, now we have a whole new year's worth of people almost. We have 9 months worth of new people who could be released, another probably 2,000 people, and we're not releasing them. That type of speed could be an improvement on what could happen. It could reduce our prison population and keep us safe. And I think the data over the past 10 months have proven that out.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, you guys, let me just say, Facebook, our social media, the numbers are fantastic. And so what I'm going to do is, I see follow-ups. I'm going to open the mic for the committee members that's here. What I'm going to do, Sean has a comment, Mr. Walker has a comment, then we're going to go to the letters. So bear with us. Sean?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kimberly, and all of the Commonwealth attorneys that are present, and Secretary Moran. It's good to see you as well. Thank you for attending. So I just had I had an interesting experience as Secretary Moran. Of course, and many people here do know. I spent 16 and a half years in Virginia DOC for an embezzlement charge. I had a 30-year sentence, and in April I received executive clemency from Governor Northam, relieving me about 10 more years of incarceration. A week after Governor Northam signed my pardon, I was diagnosed with COVID while I was waiting to be released. And I have a little bit different story, and this might not be probably, I have a little bit different story. I actually received what seemed to be pretty decent care. We were all tested in my dorm. We received medication, and we were checked on every day. And so I didn't have quite the experience that I know some other people have experienced and continue to experience in DOC. The biggest sort of concern that I had, and of course we would watch, I think the governor's administration was still doing briefings every day. The concern that I think we had, and it seems to sort of continue to echo today, is that what was actually happening on the ground was maybe not quite as accurate as what was being relayed up the chain to you, Secretary Moran, and I don't know necessarily where sort of the breakdown was in between, the facility and the public safety office. It was sort of like that game of operator, I guess, when you're a kid, when information sort of breaks down in between. But I think that's sort of a concern that seems to be continuing moving forward. And I don't know if that's necessarily a question, but I thought that was a concern I should bring up in my opportunity to speak with you. So thank you for letting me have the opportunity to talk.
Richard Walker here, Secretary. How are you? I'm grateful that you were able to attend. I've been, through my program, Bridging the Gap, Virginia, I've been able to get the release of geriatrics into housing in the Hampton and Newport News area. But I have opportunity for that much more, and my question is, there seems to be a slowdown in releasing those geriatrics with underlying issues, and I know Mr. Yoder, Reverend Yoder, will come on in and talk about one of these guys that, that had to be admitted into the hospital for 3 months. And that's an exorbitant cost that's falling upon the Department of Corrections, as opposed to releasing this man who's been incarcerated for over 40 years. You know, he cannot be in harm to anyone. He's just trying to live out his days of life. So, and that's what I've been receiving, but not to the rate that I can receive. I have approximately like 8 beds available now, you know, and it's a slow process of getting individuals released that, you know, that are geriatrics. And that's primarily what I deal with is geriatric, because I know they'll qualify for Social Security, which I was hoping the Department of Corrections reentry program would help initiate that paperwork prior to inmates release. So they have that time that by the time they are released, the Social Security or disability will kick in and they'll be self-sustained and self-sufficient. But, you know, it's been a very, very, very dragging, slow process of releasing, you know, those individuals that are 65 or older. I got a guy that's 72 years old, you know, and they're no harm to themselves or anybody else at that age. They're just trying to live out the rest of their lives. Is there something we can do to push that, the compassion law, to push more individuals that are older to get them released from incarceration? And most of them are in the medical units of most of the facilities.
Well, Richard, I will inquire about that. That is a part of parole. So that's not the pardon. That's not the, though I will tell you, as the pardon petitions come in, we look for those that involve individuals over 65 to try to prioritize them for investigation. But as a part of the parole, as you well know, there's geriatric release age 65 if you've you know, served 5 years, 60 if you've served 10. We did have the compassionate release bill. That was another criminal justice reform and prison reform that Kimberly mentions. And actually, Kimberly, now that I think we have actually done a lot of what I think we would call prison reform too, and in terms of the compassionate release bill that we got through. That was a governor's bill, and work with the legislature. We got that passed. Also, fishback, those individuals who were sentenced between, you know, after parole was abolished to 2001, and the jury was not informed that parole had been eliminated. So that, I think, was a significant, you know, actually it's over 500 individuals who are being reviewed by the parole board as we speak for fishback release. And then the juveniles, you know, we set the limit on a 20-year sentence for anyone who was sentenced as a juvenile. So that was another significant prison reform measure. So at least in those 3 instances, there's probably more though, but they come to mind as we talk about this. But Richard, specifically to you, I'll inquire. Tanya Chapman is our new chair. I think we have a great parole board, and you know, they're making some tough decisions over there. And I'm not sure why you think geriatric has been slowed down. I don't know, but I'll make that inquiry and follow up with me on that. Let's communicate once I get that information, would you? You know my email, Richard, at Brian. I spell it with an I, by the way, Brian. Brian.Moran@governor.virginia.gov.
All right. So at this time, we have a couple letters that's going to be read by Pastor Yoder and Jen Carter. So first of all, let me just say this. Pastor Yoder, Jen, are you short on time? You short on time, Jen? You need to go first? Okay. Let our guest go. Pastor Yoder, will you turn on your camera, please? Secretary Moran, somebody said you are great in replying to emails. A lot of compliments coming out today. Pastor Yoder, are you there? Okay, yeah. Jen, would you start? Would you start until the pastor come on? Unmute your mic, Jen.
I think Pastor Yoder is here, actually. There he is.
There he is. Yeah. Okay, Pastor Yoder, would you start and read a couple letters for us, please? Excerpts, please.
Yes. This is one I just got. I got locked up in April 2019 for drugs charges and got 4 years. I've done more than half of my time. I have Crohn's disease. I'm doing my time at Lunenburg Correctional Center, which has 30 or more cases. at the present time. It's in the reentry building, and I don't know how long before it spreads. I know I'm not perfect and I have to do my time, but my DOC time has been turned into a death sentence. The person that Richard Walker was mentioning a while ago is 52 years old. He's been in prison for over 40 years. He had high blood pressure and was overweight. On June 4, he was taken to VCU's medical center. He writes, "I couldn't breathe. I needed someone to come get me in a wheelchair. The medical report says I was admitted for respiratory failure and septic shock secondary to COVID-19. He spent 3 months in the hospital with many of those, much of that time in intensive care and on a respirator. And at the time when I came out of ICU, I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, didn't have any strength. From there, he was sent to Southampton Memorial for rehab and spent 2 more months before being returned to Buckingham. And for the last 20 years, he's had a perfect prison record, has learned 2 trades, earned his GED, took self-improvement classes, et cetera. Was just turned down for like the 12th time this past April. I have no idea what his hospitalization would have cost or has cost us as taxpayers, but that certainly is something that we should all be concerned about. In a recent letter, he says, "I'm concerned that I may die in prison in the next several years if I'm not released on a conditional pardon, because I now have been diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis. I talked to a woman on the telephone today whose son has that condition, and his doctors gave him up to 7 years to live, and they told him he's not eligible for a lung transplant. Nobody's ever talked to me about such a transplant, but yesterday I had a spell. It felt like someone grabbed, squeezed my right lung. And I've noticed the change in my breathing ever since. If I stay in DOC and something goes wrong with my lung, I'm afraid I will die before I can be sent out for help." One other friend that I correspond with at Augusta Correctional Center said I also contracted COVID, was very ill. And he writes, "I know that the COVID situation has placed all grants and releases on hold at the moment until the vaccines are issued to the inmate population. But in the meantime, lives are being lost. And it seems like when one zone clears up, another turns red here at ACC. I had to counsel several men not to quit trying to do their best this past few weeks. Yes, in their hearts, fear and disappointment has placed hopelessness in their minds. It is tough to encourage others while having to deal with the same feelings and odds myself."
Thank you, Pastor.
Harvey, good to see you, by the way.
Hey, good to see you.
That
Thanks
case.
for joining us at
sounds-
Townhall recently. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I look forward to being able to visit you in Harrisonburg. That case sounds horrible. Offline, if you'd forward me that name, I can find out why the pro board rejected. You didn't make whether it's the nature of the offense or victim input. Those are the things the pro board considers. So there must be something. I'd like to look into that because that.
Sure.
And I think you said he had served 40 years and age 52.
No, I'm sorry. It's 20 years. I misspoke. 20 some years. Yeah.
But he's okay. So would you mind offline? You don't have to divulge all that.
I'll send you that via email. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to look into that. That seems like a deserving case, but again, pro board makes these decisions. They're tough decisions, and they have to consider a number of factors.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. Jen?
Thank you, Kimberly. And I just want to start by thanking Secretary Moran for being here. I'm co-founder of the Humanization Project, but also along with Kimberly and Richard and Ryan and a few other folks who are on here, part of the steering committee for the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition. So we're really so happy that you joined us tonight. So as the Humanization Project, we work to lift up voices of people behind bars. And so I have a couple statements. The first one is from a group of guys at State Farm Enterprise Unit, and they have formed an organization called POINT. It stands for Positive Offenders Integrating New Thinking, and they're trying to become an official program. They're working to help each other with self and social awareness, and it's really a great program. They talk about all sorts of different things and meet together. Prior to COVID, they're still working on meeting in the current conditions, but it's a really great group of guys, and they're trying to educate each other basically about how to be better human beings, which is pretty cool. So I would like to say I think this is going to lift up the concern that Sean expressed. Sean is our legislative liaison, and he said, and I agree. I think there's a discrepancy between what you are putting out as what your staff should be doing and what DOC is doing and what we're actually seeing on the ground. So I'll read this statement from the guys at Point. It says, "Thank you for hearing us as humans, Mr. Moran. We know this moment is hectic for public safety. Yourself and Governor Northam have done a remarkable job communicating and keeping Virginia among the least devastated states. Credit where due. You have also repeatedly made lofty statements about safety behind bars. Today, though, we highlight discrepancies between words and action. What we have experienced on the ground here in DOC is far from your stated aspirations for keeping us safe. We believe this is you being fed misinformation rather than conscious disregard. That is the biggest issue, accountability for DOC. There appears to be none, and we implore you to correct that. It is making you and this administration look bad, turning off voters, defying legal agreements, and costing lives. In April, the legislature and governor championed early release for anyone who met strict standards near the end of their sentence. Yet to this point, DOC has only actually released about a third of those qualifying. They claim others have been approved, so why are they still locked up? Clearly, meeting the standards was meant to automatically produce release, yet DOC insists on keeping conditions crowded. You have repeatedly been fed false information by DOC admin that you then made public. An example came in December when you proudly announced no active DOC cases at the same time we had multiple cases here at State Farm that we all knew about. Such misinformation sows distrust and creates discord here. DOC has repeatedly deeply violated a legally agreed upon safety protocol settlement. Since it began, the courts have already confirmed 2 failures to adhere with more inevitable. Dozens of people here have documented numerous violations with food service, laundry, mixing populations, etc. and are suing. DOC has also made use of this situation to eliminate all positive opportunities for residents without implementing enough safety procedures to actually keep out the virus. We have seen refusal to test each staff member before each set of consecutive work days, halt the non-essential enterprise shops, or don full PPE for close contact, even as staff are the only vector in. Asked directly, high-ranking officers have claimed that they just don't feel like it. Yet they readily ended all education, rehabilitative, religious, and visitation opportunities without offering any guidelines for reinstatement. Safety as a crutch, not a tool. This reckless impunity now spills over to the vaccines. They have twice forced us to sign whether or not to get the vaccine without providing any information with which to make the decision. This coalition submitted a list of important questions through ACLU's council about a month ago. They were then told that we have the answers, but this is not the case at all, despite repeated written queries to the medical department here. Presumably, DOC told you it was done when it wasn't. How long will you let them do so? This is a potentially fatal decision, and failure to provide adequate information only feeds historically legitimate doubts about vaccines here. When will we get the answers in writing that we need and the settlement agreement demands? This pandemic has cast light on upon insularity and dishonesty in broader DOC operations, much deeper than COVID, but this context is particularly egregious and harmful. Already, this has been featured on network news investigations to discredit your word, administration, and efforts at public safety. So we ask you this: why do you still accept and regurgitate DOC misinformation? Why do you continue to allow them to operate without oversight and accountability? What will it take for DOC to be forced to actually operate in the interest of public safety and according to the law? And then we have another statement.
Hey, Jen,
Yeah.
Jen, I'm gonna have to cut it short there.
That's fine.
If the secretary has comments there, we have a couple important Facebook questions, and I want to make sure Miss Margaret get hers in. But I thank you for the letter.
Yes.
And Secretary Moran, if you have any comments or any other panel members.
The letter made reference to an ongoing lawsuit, and so that is a part of ongoing litigation. So I'm not going to get into specifics, but I appreciate the letter. I heard it loud and clear, and I'm not sure if I ever said we didn't have any in December. DJJ didn't have any. Department of Juvenile Justice hasn't had any long time, but I think the lowest we got to was 16. I made that mention in front of a special session committee, only to learn the next day with aggressive testing, the number went up. But regardless, we're trying to get our arms around the COVID pandemic. It is a highly contagious disease. We have congregate housing. I will say we're down to about just over 24,000 inmates. And one of the issues that is going to be, that is a challenge right now, is many of our regional jails have reached capacity. And of course, we don't want to accept new prisoners because of the COVID pandemic. Any transfers we shut down back in March or April. And so that is a challenge. There's over 7,000 now, I think, state responsible inmates in local jails. Some jails are at 50% capacity. I think Fairfax for one, but others are at capacity. And so we're working with our regional jails to try to accommodate their challenges and their capacity challenges. And that is a problem. And so we're trying to address that. But Jen, I appreciate the letter very much. It's well written. I don't know, there is ongoing litigation. I know that's being tested in the courts, and the ACLU is not shy about taking DOC to court and imposing the conditions of that settlement and the guidelines. So I think at this point I'll leave it at that based on the litigation.
I appreciate that, and the guys at Point, I don't know that they actually expected you to answer the questions, but I think they really just wanted you to hear what they had to say. So we really appreciate that you took the time to listen.
All right, thank you so much. Miss Margaret, thank you for signing on from deep down in the woods there.
Seriously. I know time is running short. I just have a question. I know that the DOC has the statistics and the number of vaccinations, and they update daily, but there is nothing that you can find out about the jails. I call them, I write them, I fax them, I walk over there when they're near me, and no one will give updates in a timely way. This is extremely frustrating for advocates, extremely frustrating for inmates, because they have a lot of misinformation about what's happening in their very own jail. How many people have COVID? And I'll call, I'll write, I do everything. Why can't we have statistics on jails? I don't understand that.
This is probably a good time for me to say I don't oversee jails.
I know, but there's DOC inmates in jail.
Right. I have the 44 DOC facilities. Also probably a good time to say I don't do pardons. The pardons get submitted to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office too, by the way, just to clarify. I certainly do have the parole board and the DOC and DJJ report to me. So, but that's a challenge, Margaret, because we have independent jails.
Well, somebody's got to put some pressure on them.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I don't know, that I'll let me think through that if there's somehow to do, but I think it's going to be on an individual basis.
Well, the individual basis isn't working.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
So if you have the governor's ear.
I'll let me think through that. Well, I'll work with the sheriff. I mean, transparency is important. I mean, I gave you the numbers of DOC. I do think, regardless of what you think about DOC, it is on their website. The numbers are updated, and you can look at them. But I don't know. Let me think about the jail thing, and I would contact.
Can I add one more thing too? Just because I write to so many Hispanic prisoners, we really need a Spanish-speaking liaison. We really do. That's all. Just my comment.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Secretary Moran, will you give us an extra 5 minutes just to take 2 questions from Facebook? We have more than over 500 questions, and I would like to pull 2 more before we close it out.
Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. Okay, so this question is reference Fishback. What's going on with Fishback? You have over 500 people in their 40s who have health issues who could have been released by now. That's the question.
Yeah, the Fishback, that law just took effect last July, and Pro Board is reviewing the Fishback cases. I can try to find out how many Fishback releases have occurred. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay. We have another
Fishback,
one.
I think, too, now are eligible for geriatric as well. So I think when I ask that question, oftentimes I'm told, well, some of them are geriatric, so it's difficult to separate between who got released based on Fishback or who got released based on geriatric. But I can try to find that out, Kimberly.
Okay, fantastic. And then thanks to President Biden and his proclamation to end privatization of regional jail. You know you have that question, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. All I'm going to say is Virginia.
And we don't have regional jails. I don't have regional jails. We do have one private prison, prisons, jails, prisons, DOC, and we do have one in Lawrenceville. There was legislation submitted by Senator Evan. There might be a companion House bill. I can't recall it right now, but the Senate bill got rejected to eliminate that. But we have no position on that. I think DOC did do a study that you're all welcome. It's posted up on the LIS. You take a look at that. It was really a matter of, if we're going to run the prison, DOC will have to, there's some budgetary concerns, but that was our only position on that.
Okay, and in respect for your time, one last comment.
No, keep going. This is, you got a great panel there. I'm happy to, whatever you need. I had a late coffee, so I can go all night.
All right.
Well, not all night.
All right, let's go. All right, Facebook family, look, the secretary has said he would stay, and don't forget, we have the Commonwealth Attorney of Loudoun County here. We have also a candidate for North Fork Commonwealth Attorney, and we have our own Brian Kennedy here. So you can send in questions to all of them. And I'm just going to pull them. Jen, would you help me also with this? Here's one. We are getting lots of comments about the inhumane and appalling condition of jails and prisons in Virginia, specifically Sussex, Lawrenceville. Conditions that have only gotten worse as COVID continues. How is BDOC addressing this and improving conditions?
I think that's a general question. I mean, if they have a specific concern about a situation, we'll try to address it. But as a general proposition, I think you got to give a more specificity.
All right. All right.
Kimberly, can I ask a question to our Commonwealth attorneys on the panel?
Sure.
Margaret's question before about working with local and regional jails. Obviously, those are controlled by sheriffs, or the regional jail is controlled by, different groups of sheriffs coming together. You all work very closely with sheriff's departments, usually, one way or the other. Do you all have any advice for the advocates that are listening who have loved ones in local and regional jails about advocating with sheriff's departments or local actors, boards of supervisors who might fund those things, what they can do to reach out to those local actors?
Sure. So let me speak on behalf of Loudoun. We are very fortunate with our jails and the way that they're set up. Although it's a captive community, they've done really good job of trying to balance that out, where because of the reduction in our incarcerated population, that they are a tad bit more spread out. They're not luxuriously spread out. So don't let me misrepresent that or have that be misunderstood. But where you could influence that is by actually having a direct conversation with our sheriff. He is, it's mike.chapman@loudoun.gov, and he is very responsive. I'm not selling out his email. I mean, I'm telling you, if you ever follow him on social media, he is very engaged in our community. And he does a good job of being able to do that. We do have the board of supervisors as well who may be able to influence him. But speaking directly to him is probably going to be your best return on that amount of time. So I would encourage that.
All right. Okay. So yes, with right now it's just everybody ripping out the water, coffee, or whatever we're drinking here tonight. And welcome Karen Morrison. And I ask everyone that's on screen, turn on your cameras. Turn on your cameras. Don't be Facebook and it say Facebook and then nobody have a face. All right, there we go. Let's see a face. Oh, Mr. Petway over there, Spotsylvania NAACP. All right. Seems like we have a question in the corner. Francis Ross, you have a question?
Yes, I do, Secretary Brian Moran. I wanted to know, and I know it's still in the beginning stages, but lots of people are asking about it. House Bill 2325, which is the oversight bill for the DOC. Myself personally, along with other people, don't think it goes far enough, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. So we were kind of wanting to know your input on that bill, since you're the one who's over the DOC.
I'm not, we don't have a position on that bill. Is that the one patroned by Delegate Patrick Hope?
Yes, sir.
We don't have a position on that yet.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else on the panel have a question?
All right. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Mo Petway from Fredericksburg.
Spotsylvania
NAACP.
The president of Spotsylvania NAACP. The question I had was, are there funding to provide to the jails for testing? Because it seems like our jail only provide the temperature. They do the temperature, and there's no, and that determine the next steps. And however, then when they advance, there's no testing per se. I think from my understanding, they do not have access to testing, a legitimate test.
There might be someone else that's better informed about the jails. There's supposed to be testing being done at the jails, but I can't give you numbers or degree. I can only speak to what is occurring at DOC.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was saying that they're using the temperature to determine. That's the only test that they seem to have available. I was wondering, was there funding so they can purchase tests to help inmates?
Mo, I think a lot of that was being done through local health districts. So that's at least the case up where I am in Northern Virginia. Obviously, there's a lot different funding streams in different parts of the state, but I would probably reach out to your local health district and ask them why they're not funding that. And I know you all are going to be able to get that in the papers if they're not. So I think that would probably be where I would start.
Okay, it's been fantastic tonight. Anybody else on the from the committee have a question? Sure, Karen. Karen Morrison.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly. And also Secretary Moran, thank you for being here. My question, and again, it's also a concern that the General Assembly did pass the bill to release early within 1 year. And we are finding out from our paid in for that they are really not doing that. They are releasing within 1 or 2 months. Is there anything that you can do to look into that? Because if it has a release date of October 31st, 2021, they should not be in prison. And that is our biggest concern. Thank you.
As a general proposition, I did the numbers I have, 1,444 individuals have been released as of today, and 1876 been proved. That's just a matter of confirming the home plan. So that is occurring. So, if it's a specific case, Karen, I know you have my email.
Can I ask one more question, Secretary, regarding clemencies and pardons? And I know, Deputy Secretary DeShazer, that's her area. However, there's been a backup. I have clemency petitions in there from 2014 that haven't been addressed. Is there something that can be done to add more staff, to do more investigators, to provide more support for that area, that some of these petitions may be addressed? And like I said, I got at least 10 to 12 of them that I've had a meeting with Secretary Thomason, along with Deputy Secretary DeShazer, gave her a list of about 20 guys that have been turned down about 20 times each, for parole, and the same line that keeps coming up is, we still have to investigate their paperwork. But you're talking about 4, 5, 6 years, and still, these folks are still sitting in where clemencies are not being addressed.
Thanks, Richard. And I really don't want to speak for the Secretary. I will say we have asked for, from the legislature, additional funds for personnel to fund the parole board, because the parole board does the investigation and they're the ones that send it on. I mean, it gets filed with Secretary of the Commonwealth. They see if it's meritorious, they send it to the parole board and back and forth. And ultimately it circulates in the governor's office for signature, so an approval. So we have requested additional personnel. So you might want to, look at the budget requests and inform the legislators that is something that's necessary to expedite the review of these pardon petitions.
All right. So go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you again, Secretary Moran, and I really appreciate you being here. One of the questions that we're getting, visits have been shut down in Virginia Department of Corrections for, I guess, about 10 months now, so coming up towards a year. And there is, to be fair, a robust video visitation program that's available through GTL. However, there's a whole segment of people that are behind bars that are excluded from being able to access those video visits. And so, and I interact with a lot of different people that are still incarcerated and trying to advocate for them. And there's a lot of different organizations that are concerned about this, and it's an administrative policy decision on the case of the Department of Corrections to exclude people with certain offenses from participating in this video visitation program. So this would sort of, I believe, would sort of fall under your department. And is that something that could be addressed administratively to perhaps open those video visitations up for people that are currently excluded, because they simply aren't getting that interaction now. And of course, with in-person visits being shut down for everyone, they have no way to access visits at all. And so video visitation, I think, would be perhaps an opportunity to supplement that, at least in the interim, until regular visits resume.
Sean, happy to look into that. The cases I'm familiar with where I've received complaints involve sex offenses, and DOC made determinations with respect to those offenses. So now I can look into that. Why don't I just, why don't you shoot me something on that, and we'll take a look at the policy if it needs revamping. But the only cases I'm familiar with involve, some concerns that.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic night. One of the things I learned in special events, know when to make an entrance and when to make an exit. So we on top, so we're gonna leave here on top. What I'd like to do at this time is get final words from our guests, starting with our panel. Attorney Butcher, would you like to say some parting words to our viewers?
I do. And I think is how we started it. As you said, your entrance should be very similar to our exit, and that is about the focus on the community. Regardless of what role we play in the criminal justice system, be it those of us who are part of the system, so to speak, either by being within the courtrooms or those who become justice involved or those who make policy, we're all part of the same community. And at the end of the day, we need to have that human investment. His understanding is what are we doing, why are we doing, and how does it relate to safety of our community? And if it's not directly related to the safety of our community, let's do better. And thank you all for your time. And I appreciate you having this this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Candidate Ramin Fahi.
I've been glad to be a part of this discussion. This is a wonderful reminder that the entire system has to work together, that it may seem sometimes as if our interests diverge, but what we really want is for our citizens to be safe. We want people to be healthy and to be kept alive, and that we want to ensure that even folks who are confined are treated humanely and treated properly. It's also a good reminder that every one of us has to be vigilant about what we're up to, and that we all have to make sure that we advocate and that we speak together. I was really encouraged to see the wonderful dialogue among everybody here, and I hope that we can carry this dialogue forward.
Thank you so much, and I wish you the best of luck in your race. Okay. We have a clergy in the house, and as you guys know, I'm with Interfaith Action for Human Rights. And in all respect to the clergy, I have to give Pastor Yoda the opportunity to say some closing remarks also.
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity to be a part of this group tonight. And I hope we can all collaborate, work together, because it's certainly in the interests of everyone, taxpayers, families of loved ones, to have as few people incarcerated as possible and as many as possible involved in community services where they can continue their work, support their families, pay their fines, so on. So I'm just delighted for every opportunity to be a part of something like this. And I just pray regularly for release for those deserving it, and safety for those that we need, safety for everyone, for those who are needing to be confined for whatever reason. But let's not assume that we can do effective work in terms of rehabilitation while we also take a punitive approach in terms of our criminal justice system rather than a restorative approach. So we are, after all, looking to the Department of Corrections to bring about correction. It should not be simply the Department of Retribution, the Department of Punishment. And I think we can all get together on that. And I just pray God's blessing on all of you as we work together in trying to bring about a more effective justice, freedom, liberty for all.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Attorney Kennedy.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Secretary Moran. For the rest of us, I wanted to say that people behind bars, whether they're in jails or prisons, are the most vulnerable people in our Commonwealth right now. Them getting vaccines didn't happen because all advocates sat on the sidelines. It happened because a lot of you all were pushing for it. We're not going to get help for these vulnerable people, our friends, our family members, our fellow citizens, without that advocacy. So keep up the good work, keep pushing for it, and our public officials need to hear from you because the people we're advocating for are not as able to speak for themselves.
Well, thank you. Secretary Moran, would you have any closing remarks?
Just this has been a pleasure. I mean, this has been a civil dialogue, and really appreciate Kimberly you assembling this, and David's invitation to join you all. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about and frankly really listen and try to follow up on some of these issues. And there's really been a transformation. Someone who's been in this system for a long time as a legislator and as an attorney on both sides of the desk. These last 2 years, there really has been a transformation. So some of it hasn't even taken effect yet. And, I do think there's been substantial progress made. And so I'll just, it's not as bleak as some would think. I think there's been some real progress made, and you're going to see some real positive impacts based on your perception of things. And so, again, I appreciate the opportunity. Please be safe. A lot going on out there. Please be safe. It's great to see you all again.
Well, speaking of safety, I want to thank you. I know after January 6th, you was responsible for protecting Virginia, and we haven't had any incidents. So I think, look, knock on wood, right? So I want to thank you. There's a recommendation that came in that I want to give right quick. Ashley Jones, I am loyal to Facebook fans because these guys are our supporters. Ashley Jones asks if VDOT could try to get the new JPay tablets that can make calls with. They can make calls with. So if you just make a note of that, I appreciate it. So my closing remarks is simply this. I'm a veteran and I'm a mother of a wrongfully incarcerated individual. I talked with many individuals over the years about their loved ones. So rather than make an appeal for my son, God has put on my heart to make appeal for someone else's loved one. The individual is 60 years old. He's currently in Texas, and Secretary Moran, you don't have to respond. I'm just making the public appeal. My public appeal is for William Thorpe. William Thorpe is 60 years old. He's on an interstate transfer, and I asked you, Secretary Moran, to find a way to bring this man home to his wife during this pandemic. With that being said, I'm gonna close things down. I wanna thank everyone for your participation. I wanna thank the social media family for being woke and putting the information out there. We came together as a community from all walks of life to have a discussion, not a protest. We cannot protest amongst each other. We cannot fight amongst each other. We can talk about it. So with that being said, there's a prayer that I say. Give us your compassion for those in prison. Men in mercy, the broken in mind and memory. Soften the heart, the hard heart, the captives of anger. Free the innocent, parole the trustworthy. Awaken the repentance that restore hope. May prisoners' families preserve in their love. Good night, y'all. Thank you so much. Peace.